video, we will talk about painting green with watercolor. I think we'll know that we have a couple of options for painting greens. We can use the color straight out of the tube, or we can mix blue and yellow and get some additional shades. What I recently discovered after I read Jean Dobby's book, Making Colors Sing, a chapter in this book is talking about painting natural looking and varied greens. And somehow it never occurred to me to try to mix my greens with complementary colors or close to complementaries like reds, oranges, and browns. So I tested that suggestion, and the greens that I got were really natural looking, beautiful, kind of on the olive side, but much better than olive out of the tube. As you see, I painted some swatches here. I didn't have exact pigments that Jean recommended, but I took the greens that I have, Cascade green and sap green, and also did have Viridian that she uses, and tried mixing them with various warm colors on my palette. So if you look at the video description, I put all the pigments and all the combinations that I discovered in there. I think it's just easier to see. And now in the demo part of this video, I'm going to put my discoveries into practice, and I'm going to paint figure in landscape using those beautiful greens that I discovered. And I have another tip for painting swatches. I think it's a good idea to do them two ways, to paint first one color and then drop another color into it and see how it turns out, and then do a second swatch and mix those two colors on the palette and paint a swatch with that, because as you see, you will get different results depending on how you mix your colors on paper or directly on the palette. So that increases your palette even more and gives you more options for color selection. And again, write everything you mixed as well, because you will forget. And also, before you start painting, it's important to let your swatches dry and look at them, because as you know, watercolor changes quite drastically after it dries. It lightens quite a bit. So painting swatches gives you a good idea of how much pigment you need to use to get the results that you want. Okay, let's now put our newly acquired knowledge and all the new colors we discovered to the test. To start, I'm going to paint the sunlight. I discovered that it's very important when you paint landscape to start with yellow, because it gives your painting certain glow that it's impossible to achieve otherwise. So what I'm going to do is apply a wash of transparent yellows to the whole painting except the figure. And I'm throwing in some permanent orange in there as well. That will create that glow, behind my landscape. I started wet on dry. I have a very big brush, so the brush actually holds enough water for me to do a loose wash. If you use the smaller brush, it will not hold enough pigment and water, and your background will be streaky. So if you're not wetting your paper, which I didn't do because it will all just buckle, I'm using a watercolor block, and sometimes your paper gets ripped off the block. So instead of wetting the paper, I just use a big brush. Okay, this is my sunshine. Now we can start working on the figure. It's going to be basically the darkest area in my painting. And here I'm starting to do a little bit of negative painting. It's a technique I use a lot because I have very light sunlit leaves in the foreground. So I need to leave them light, and I have to paint the figure kind of behind them. So I'm painting around the leaves, and I'm mixing my darks. In this case, I mixed Cascade green with some Windsor red, and I added a little bit of Phtalo blue, and that way I can vary the temperature of the color, adding more blue and green or more red to it, and achieve more varied color. I do not use black pigment in my watercolors, so that's how I create the illusion of black in my painting. I'm trying to paint very loosely and without going into too many details, because if you try to paint small details right from the start, your painting will be all fractured and fall apart. It's important to work on larger forms first and go into details at the very end. I know it's hard to do, but it always creates better results. And another thing we need to resist is concentrating on the face, because I want the figure to be part of the landscape and it's not a portrait, and I don't want the figure to be something separate. I want it to naturally blend into the landscape. Let my painting dry. Let's work on the background. Now it's time to mix our greens. So I start with Viridian green, and I'm dropping in some lemon yellow and also some crimson lake into it. And you see that I get that nice wash of varied natural looking greens, which will be very hard to achieve if I only used tube greens directly out of the tube. Very important to preserve at least some white paper in your watercolor, in my opinion, because that's what watercolor is about, right? We want to see the paper, we want it to be transparent, and we want to have at least a little peak of white paper somewhere. And I'll tell you in advance, at the end I'll be using a little bit of white gouache to bring back the highlights. Painting edges exactly with watercolor, with just watercolor, is very difficult, at least for me. Sap green mixed with light red, which is a red-brown color. I would have never thought about doing it, but after reading Jean Dobby's book, I realized that it gives you very nice olive green color, much better than olive green you get out of the tube. So now it's my new favorite mixture for trees that are in the shade. And Veridian works well too. It's a cool green, has a lot of blue in it, so for distant trees, distant foliage, it works great. And you see my negative painting, I'm doing it on top here as well, because there are some tree branches that are hanging from the top in front of the camera, in front of the viewer, and I want to preserve them. I want them to be lighter than the background, so I have to paint the background around them. You can see painting is starting to take shape. That grass on the bottom, I don't want to paint every blade of grass, so splattering works really good for that. So all I need to do now is add my darks and just verify all the details, and basically my painting will be done. You can see it's going pretty fast. I think working quickly like that really keeps your painting fresh and prevents you from overworking and over drying it. I think I can add a few tree trunks that I see there in the distance. Mixture of Phtalo blue with Windsor red gives me a nice dark color. So let's do that. Maybe add a few dark details for the coat. The figure is in the foreground, so there will be a lot of contrast in the details. And I'll also paint her scarf. I just love how the colors in her scarf are the same that we see in the background in the surrounding landscape. So that's what I'm going to do, use the same colors for the scarf. to add a few details to those lighter areas that I painted around. I see all kinds of colors in those leaves, so I'll try to add them and try to capture them and try to work lightly also in some areas. And also I think I need more contrast, so some areas I will darken quite a bit, and I'm using a mixture of phthalo green with magenta. It's another green mix for our collection that creates a very beautiful, cool, dark color that I'm going to use for my darks everywhere. I think I can use a little more texture in the foreground. You know, the closer the plane of the painting is to us, the more details we will see. And I think splattering also will work well here. So I'm going to do that. The distant trees need to be darker, I think, and cooler. The objects get cooler as they recede. And I will continue working on my details. So verifying all the edges, finding the details and varying the color using the same principle. Maybe throw in a few branches that will add visual interest as well. And I'm trying really hard to work transparently because I want to preserve the tone of my leaves. I will make them a little bit darker, but in general I want the foreground to be very light, and I want that effect when the leaves have the sun behind them and they are basically transparent. As you see, I'm still leaving the figure, my main subject, the focus of my painting, unfinished, because I feel that if I concentrate on it, I will overwork it, so I'm leaving it to the last, and I'm working on everything around it, trying to get all the tonal relationship in place, and then I can always add just a few details to the figure and the painting will be finished. Okay, let's work on those lower leaves as well, add some colors and some details there. And I think those details work best as some of them are done wet on dry and some of them are done wet on wet. That gives us beautiful floating watercolor effects. And let me know in comments, what is your favorite tube green? Which one do you use? I'm always looking to expand my palette and to test new colors, so I will appreciate your comments. And hopefully you'll subscribe, so if I make a new video using your favorite color, you will be able to get the notification that it's posted. Okay, I'm going to clean my edges a little bit with a flat brush, and also I'm going to verify the details on the figure with a flat brush, and also using a small brush I'll just add a few more details to the figure, deepen the shadows on the face. You know, the sun is so bright you can't really see a lot of details on the face, so just a few darker areas really create the illusion, you know, that the face is properly developed. And the last thing I'm going to do is use a little bit of white gouache to add some highlights, verify the edge of the hair, add some details to the camera she's holding. And this is the finished result. I hope you enjoyed this video. The technique we learned in here is using negative painting for landscapes, and also most importantly mixing greens beyond tube colors, being brave and mixing them with their complementaries, reds and browns, to achieve beautiful natural looking greens for our landscape. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one here on Tamirab Studios channel.